cool. It's funny because when I told my mom about it, before it was going to happen, I'm going to do something with Mattel and they're going to make a WNBA Barbie. And she said, well, do they know that I didn't let you play with Barbies when you were a little girl? She's like, because, no actual human female has those dimensions and looks like that. Like, that was the kind of mother I had, which was terrific. But I said, well, this is the beauty. This Barbie is actually, it's a sports Barbie. It's not like the normal one. So it's okay for me to be associated with it.
It was awesome.
But yes, I'm glad you still have yours.
I do. I'm waiting to maybe try to get it signed next time I see you. I'm going to bring it around.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about Becky Hammon. I think when they talked about Becky interviewing for jobs, and one of the things I talk about was, I think that, the interviewing part is great. That's the first step, right? But I said, when Becky moved from behind the bench to having a seat on the bench and being, there's different roles, right? There's however many assistant coaches, but a big move is, and so when we see that happen, then I think you're going to really see the opportunities be legitimate for Becky to actually become a head coach sooner rather than later. And then next thing you know, she's promoted to take a seat on the bench because of one of the assistants getting a head job somewhere else. What is your perspective on that, and how soon do you think that Becky Hammon will be coaching an NBA team?
Well, I think just as important as her, being an assistant is to be an assistant on that particular staff. When it first happened, it had to be somebody like Coach Popovich to do it. Somebody who's universally respected, somebody who, who cares if there's any criticism? And if the criticism comes, really, who are you to criticize Greg Popovich? It had to be the right person to do it on the right staff. And so that's why it was so perfect for that to happen for her. I don't know. It's interesting because, some of the questions sometimes can be about whether the guys will respect a female head coach. And, Cheryl, I'm sure you've seen this plenty too. There's nobody who respects, at least in my experience, there's no group of people who respected the women's basketball players more, who treated them better than the men's players. When I was at UConn, the men's team, they saw us every day working out. They understood what we were going through. They respected what we were doing. And I felt the same way when I was playing on WNBA teams that had NBA teams in the same cities, that those guys, more than anyone, any group of people, respect the women. You see it now, LeBron tweeting often about the WNBA and watching games, and other NBA players doing the same. So I think I think a woman can be very successful doing that. I think the guys can easily accept her. It's just going to be, again, a matter of the right organization not only making the hire, but having the belief and the support there that if there are lean times, that they can stand up and fight for what's right. And whoever it is, you would think it would be Becky in terms of the coach that they've hired.
Well, I don't think it'll be long. I said it might be 5 years, but I think this thing is moving pretty quickly, and it could be well inside of 5 years. And I look forward to her getting that opportunity.
Well, Cheryl.
Yeah, for sure.
Cheryl already is the GM and coach. Do you have time? Here's the big question. Do you have time to be the GM of the Lynx, the coach of the Lynx, the coach of the Timberwolves, and still do my podcast? That's what I'm worried about.
Well, I would do three of those four things. I would exclude the Timberwolves position. I would say the general manager and head coach, and then the podcast is where my bread is buttered. All
right, so you both know Gino Auriemma very well. Obviously, Rebecca, you played for him. Cheryl, you've worked with him with USA Basketball. So I know he's a character. Do either of you have any good Gino stories you can tell that won't get you in too much trouble?
Well, this is absolutely Rebecca Lobo all the way. This is all you, B.
Gosh, I don't know. Like if there's actual stories. I mean, I think one of the things that makes good coaches really good coaches, and I think it's true for Coach Auriemma, I think it's true for Cheryl, is, the honesty that they have with their players. They tell it like it is. Players sometimes, while it's not exactly what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear, and you come to respect that, at least if you're the type of player who wants to get better. But I think the other thing with him is that he just has a good sense of humor and, can rib his players and say things to his players and make them laugh. in equal measure to making them hold back tears at times, especially for the younger players that he coaches. So it's not necessarily like these little specific examples of things, but just somebody who is brutally honest in a real and very funny way at times.
He's got the sarcasm thing mastered. That's what I learned in being around him. So actually, after being around him and seeing Maya on the national team, I thought, boy, does Maya have it easy in Minneapolis. Because he's brutal. He's absolutely brutal. So, Rebecca, who's the best team that you've seen this year in the WNBA?
It's fun because it's been an evolving season, right? Like if you'd asked me that question about your team a few weeks ago versus, and then asked me the question after watching Seattle, every team is in different phases of where they are. We're talking about it today, and the teams that I think right now, and again, things can change in a couple of weeks. The teams that would not surprise me if I saw them in the finals would be LA, Minnesota, of course, Seattle, Phoenix, and then Connecticut. None of those teams in any way would surprise me. There's nights when Washington looks great. And then there's nights when any of those teams that we've just mentioned don't look great. But again, it could be because they're on the tail end of a crazy back-to-back or a long road trip or a key piece is missing. That's one thing, Cheryl, with this season the way it is and everything, so many games in such a short span of time and the crazy travel, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how things play out near the end.
Yeah, I said this is a survival of the fittest type of season. I just heard Kurt Miller do an interview from Connecticut, and he was just lamenting the idea. He said it was a glorified AAU type of a season. You don't get to practice ever. And so he was lamenting that. And that's usually what we say when we're not in the midst of maybe some struggles and you need practice time to get some things straightened out. I know I certainly felt that way when we lost 6 out of 9 games. We weren't getting much practice time. We weren't playing well. We couldn't get our rhythm. And I think every team is going to go through that. And I looked at a couple other schedules. I think LA's schedule is very, very, in a much better situation than a lot of teams. I don't see any long stretches of 8 of 9 on the road, which Connecticut's doing. Like I mentioned, we were 6 of 9. I think Phoenix right now is in the midst of 8 out of 9 on the road, but they do finish 9 of 11 at home. I remember the years that when we win a championship, and sometimes your schedule lends it to, being able to have the best record in the league. And then obviously the way that the playoff format is now, that being in the top 2, puts your chances of being in the finals, I think, exponentially higher than someone that might have to go through a stretch of games that you get tripped up and you lose. If you have 8 of 9 on the road, going 500 on the road is really challenging anymore. Any road win is really, really difficult. So it is going to be interesting, I think, how we're all going to get beat up. I think that, this single elimination format, I think is going to get really interesting this season because you're going to, like you said, there's a lot of really good teams that could be, putting it all together by the time it gets down there. So I assume we'll see you. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I feel like I need to ask you the question because you're the one playing against this and watching more than anybody is, what are the teams that you've watched and either been surprised that, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but you watch and say, wow, this team is really talented and they could be a really tough out come the playoffs.
Well, the only team I'm going to say is Atlanta. Because if I say anything different than Atlanta, they're going to kick our ass on Friday night when we play them and go, you didn't think we were. And so that's, I'd have to avoid, that. I think you're spot on, what you talked about. I think all the coaches would talk about, the LA, the Phoenix, the Seattle. I mean, they've been really, really good. Connecticut, until they lost Alyssa Thomas, was really, really good. So I think we'd all agree with those teams that I think that they have something a little extra special. And but the others are, they're all capable of beating them. I think that's the nice thing is that there's not, you put us in a 5-game series, there's 6 teams that you go, I don't know who would win in a 5-game series. And so I would agree with your assessment. And but I also know that, whether it's Chicago or Vegas who's finding their way, or Dallas, Atlanta. I mean, there's just no, I guess, at this point, there's no easy game. And I think you've seen that. Are there teams that should be better than others? For sure. When you say in a 5-game series, you think this team should win, but that's not easy to say right now.
Well, it's I was enjoying the retweet of, or I don't know if it was a retweet or just a tweet, when Kelsey Plum made her faux pas and called your team old. But just what was it like for you, especially early in the season? It's been a long time since you've had any struggles, especially to start the year. What has that been like for you, and especially when you see situations like people saying things that you're not accustomed to them saying, unless it's like me and Ryan or Holly calling you guys old.
Yeah, we're used to that. We're used to hearing those things. Rebecca, that was something that I said that probably bothered me the most was, I get it. We weren't playing very well, and we opened ourselves up, to some of the narrative. But, I feel like, we've been successful for 7 years, an unprecedented run. We won 4 championships, and I get that people are absolutely tired of Minnesota Lynx being successful. There's a Lynx fatigue to it. They don't have a very likable coach. I think that adds to it. And so I think that, all of a sudden, we're losing games and people are acting like they won the championship. And so that was, there was some behavior of some players on other teams that we go, this is not okay. When we beat people for 7 years, we just beat them and we carried on. We weren't on Instagram posting things. We weren't calling other teams old. We weren't doing things like that. You just win the game and you move on. And so, celebrations, standing over us after you block a shot and doing some stuff and just behaviorally, I took exception to some things. And, of course I shared that with the team a little bit. And, they let me get riled up about those things. They just, like I said, they just keep going, and they have a mindset of, like I told them, I said, I don't know if it bothers you to be called old. I think it's pretty short-sighted, as you know, that, in this league, you can, some of the best players are the oldest players. And so, right. I just think, like I was just saying this to Jim, I think it's used, in professional sports a lot. Age is talked about a lot in other sports, but in our sport, in the WNBA, you can be 36 and be the best player in this league. And, with age comes wisdom. And that's, that's something I would have every day of the week. And, over the last few years, it's been the oldest teams that have been the most successful teams. And so I guess Kelsey Plum hadn't been paying attention.
Oh, poor Kelsey.
Yeah, she. The good thing is Cheryl won't really persist with this line. She's going to let it drop within 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, exactly.
She will be referring to the Kelsey Plum old line when Kelsey is old. Let's put it that way.
When Kelsey is old, exactly right. She might be coaching her by then, but yes.
I think the only thing that's old is me. Yeah, that's what I said. So when you going through that 6 of 9, the uncharted water for us, it was challenging. It was really, really challenging because, I'm a sore loser. I have every bone in my body is like my father when it comes to that. He was the sorest loser you could imagine. I always talk about, I remember this vividly being a kid, and he would break out the Monopoly game. We would play the family Monopoly game, and my mom was really, really good. And, after a while we were like, oh gosh, Dad, you're not going to do this again, are you? Like you think you're going to beat her. You can't beat her. And sure enough, we'd always get to that certain point in the game. She's got all the money. He's got nothing. And instead of losing, he would just flip the board. Yeah. And that would be it. And so that's me. That's how I handle losing. I'm, throwing things and hitting things and, hide your kids kind of moments type things. But we're a highly competitive group. And I think the coolest thing is that, of course I'm kidding. I tried to maintain my composure as best as I could. I tried to have perspective and, that we knew what needed to happen. We just had to get there. And, but this group was, they were highly disappointed. But the great thing is that we have so much knowledge that we've collected along the way that we knew what we had to do was in our control, no one else's control. And that's the best position you can be in when you're trying to fix something and get it turned around, is that you're in direct control of it. And that's what we found ourselves being able to do.
Yeah.
Hey, Rebecca, appreciate the time very much. It was great talking to you. Of course, tell Steve we said hello, and hope we get to do this again because it was a blast.
Well, you just have to give me your word that if we do it again, it's on one of the live shows, so I can be at that spot where you guys are having those. What are the flavored beer that you like, Cheryl?
Blueberry Blonde.
Yeah,
my treat.
Next time I need to have a blueberry blonde while we're doing this.
Well, we should do something in Minneapolis around the All-Star game.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Absolutely.
Let's count it a date.
And let's invite Holly, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Holly will be there.
Beautiful.
She's doing a dance in the kitchen.
Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, guys.